So I'm here this evening with two individuals who are running for the school committee. Darryl Wright, who's an incumbent, been on the school committee for 7.5 years, and Ann Schools, who is running for the open seat. Here tonight to just talk a little bit about some topics that are important to the school committee moving forward, and for you to share your beliefs on some of these important topics. I'm going to start with a really simple question. Basically, I'd like you to each introduce yourselves and to say one thing that you are passionate about public education. So if you could do that, I'll start with the incumbent here to give him the role here. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Darryl Wright. Like Heather said, I've been on the school committee for 7.5 years, been the chair for the last 3. The biggest thing, or the thing I'm most passionate about on being on the school committee, is educating our students and educating our children. It's a great opportunity for me as an individual to be part of a team and with the leadership team and the administration that we have to work towards providing the best education that we can to the students of Gorham. I get very passionate when we start talking, and whether I agree or disagree with others, it's something that I am very passionate about, trying to do what's best for our students and to provide them the best education that we can.
Thank you, Darryl. Ann?
So I'm Ann Schools. I've lived in Gorham for 6 years, and I have 2 children in the Gorham School District. And so I've always been passionate about education, and it's extremely important to me that every student in Gorham receives high quality education. In fact, that's one of the reasons we moved to Gorham, because we love the school district. So I wanted to take this opportunity to get more involved in the community and the schools.
Great, thank you. So I have a series of sort of topics that I'm going to share information about, and then I'll ask a question about each of the topics, okay? So, and I'll just sort of take turns, whether I start with Ann or Darryl, so I'm not going to let you know which one is which to go for it. We'll just go with the natural flow of the conversation, all right? So the first topic is one that I know the school committee has talked at length around, and is a struggle for every school committee and school board in the state of Maine, and that's around engaging with the public. And how do you communicate effectively with the public about what's going on in the schools? Because the schools are a very complex organization to run and operate. There's always a lot going on, and people sort of only get the fringes of what's happening, and you want to try to communicate more effectively with folks, but struggle to know how. And I know this has been a goal for the school committee for several years, and I know that the school committee has done some really great things, like the school committee goes to each of the schools to visit with the PI groups or the parent groups. We have all of our meetings are public, we have them recorded, people can watch them on the GoCat, and we have information on our websites, and we really try to do a really good job of sharing information with the public. But I guess my question to you would be, you know, when it comes to communication, what are some ideas that you might have to better communicate with the public? And I guess I'll start with Darryl again, as giving a little bit more leeway for Ann here. But start with you on that conversation, then Ann, you can sort of pick up.
Well, that is a conversation we've been having for many years on the school committee, and it has been a goal. How do we engage the public more? I think one of my most favorite meetings is the PI meetings, and getting out and actually sitting around the table and talking to the teachers that show up, administrators that show up, and parents that show up, and really talk about whatever the issue is. We don't go in with an agenda. Nope. We sit down and we ask, so what would you like to talk about? And that's it. That's our agenda. So we really get some really good conversations and some great feedback. As to what else to try, we do everything that we can. We put a lot on it on the superintendent through her blog posts, utilizing Facebook and things like that. Having the information out there, the only thing that I can say is we are very open to getting communication. When people send us emails, we actually read them. Some people think that the school committee does not read the emails because usually it's either the chair of the school committee or the superintendent that responds. That is by design. That is the communication protocol that the school committee has in place. But every school committee member actually reads all the emails, and it does become part of the discussions, and we've received some great information and feedback in the past that has helped us through the process and the decision making that we are doing. Mm-hmm. What else we can do? I really, we have it, like you said, Heather, everything that we're trying to do with blogs. Everybody knows what our email is. I think the most conversations I have are at Hannaford. when I try to go grocery shopping, and it's usually when I'm trying to pick up something quickly. And I'm in a rush, but somebody stops me and has a conversation, and you know what? I'm more than willing to have those conversations. But it's just, we need people to approach us. We're trying to get out there, and if anybody has any ideas, like I said, go to the website. You have our emails. Shoot me an email as to what you think might work better, because we're open to trying to communicate. Because the last thing we want to do is have anybody think that we're trying to make decisions behind closed doors or anything like that. We are very open as a group of making sure that all of our decisions are done in public, our conversations are done in public, so that everybody can hear what we have to say. So the other plug I would have is just for our workshop meetings. If you really want to know what the discussion is, that's where the discussions happen, is during the workshop meetings that we have. So I would recommend everybody to attend those. That will help with communication quite a bit.
Yeah. And those are typically the second meetings of each month.
Correct.
Yeah, good. Ann, any thoughts as a newcomer? Any ideas?
Well, as a parent
there you go.
in the community, I actually believe that the school district has been phenomenal at communicating, whether or not it's through social media, newsletters, emails, parent-teacher folders coming back and forth. It's just been absolutely instrumental in keeping my family informed about what goes on at the school. And I agree with everything that Darryl said regarding decisions being open and public, and I want to continue to obviously take into consideration everybody's opinions, and administrators, teachers, community members, students, when we have any decisions facing us. So again, I'll echo what Darryl said and say any ideas to improve the communications I would be open to, should I be elected.
Good, thank you. Yeah, it's a good piece that you shared around the importance of student communications, hearing their voices in the decision-making. They are sort of the consumers of what it is that we make for decisions, so that was a really good plug on that particular piece. So the next topic I have is around a topic that, I'm going to start with Ann on this particular one, just because I think Darryl's been spending a lot of time with this topic recently. So the topic is around our growing student populations. I'm just going to share a little bit of information, and then I'll ask a general question. It doesn't have to be detail-oriented, but the background is that since 2015-16, we've actually had an increase of about 153 students in grades K through 5. If you look at across K through 12, it's about 108 students that we've increased over that period of time. Our projections have us growing by about 156 students in 9 years at K through 5 level, and at K through 12, we're actually supposed to grow by another 400 students in the next 9 years across the system. We've recently added, and Darryl could attest to this, we've added positions over the past 3 years as a result of those increases in growth. We've had to add a couple of portable or modular classroom spaces, and most of our schools are, with the exception of the middle school right now, although that's due to change, but most of our schools are either at or above their capacity for the number of students, or close to it. And so we're really dealing with some issues around growing student populations and trying to juggle some really difficult conversations that result from that. And so I guess the question that I have for you is, as a school committee member, how would you work with fellow school committee members? How would you work with town councilors? How would you work with parents and others to sort of understand the needs of the growing population and then try to address them?
So it's a difficult question, and I'm sure it's been an extremely complicated issue that requires careful consideration. For first, I'm thrilled that so many people are coming to Gorham. I love the town. I think it's a wonderful place to have a family and to raise children, and we have great schools. And I believe we're one of the fastest growing towns in Maine.
Yes.
But as I said, I believe it's a complicated situation. I believe careful consideration has to be given to every situation, whether or not it's expanding schools, whether or not it's discussing reconfiguration plans, whether or not it's discussing, again, the use of modular buildings as short-term solutions. But overall, I believe we need a responsible long-term plan that not only addresses the growth that we see today, but the growth years down the road. How we get there, I'm not sure, but I believe any decision and any process needs to be we need to take under advisement, again, I'll go back to the community members, teachers, administrators, and make the best decision possible. But unfortunately, I don't have more of a direct answer for you because I think it's a very complicated situation that I may be jumping into.
Well, very complicated situation. I think Darryl maybe can inform us a little bit about some of that.
You're going to be jumping into the deep end of the pool on that one when we get back into session after the election. This is a topic that I've been studying for over 2 years now, as part of the first committee that talked about the K-5 reconfiguration. Going through that process in which we had administration, staff, we had some members of the public on there. I've done the numbers backwards, forwards, looking at what our growth is, what our projections are going to be, and where we're going, and it is a difficult issue. What we've tried to do on the school committee and what I've tried to do is make sure that the town council is fully aware of what the impact of the growth is on the district, because that's what, with the growth, we're bringing in new families. So every new house that we bring in is probably going to bring in a family with 1 or 2 kids. So having to deal with that is something that we're trying to do and share with the town council as to what those decisions make. The other thing that we've been doing and how we're dealing with this, and when we have the public that comes and talks to us and says, well, you guys need to stop growing, well, we can't do that as a school committee. That's not our purview. Our purview is to deal with the students that are here and that are coming. So that's what our focus is trying to develop the classrooms, develop the schools, the configurations, whatever it is that will be best for all of the students K-12. Not specifically with one school, one grade level. We're looking at all of them. So having that information and thinking of it that way, letting the town council know what we're trying to do, and then dealing with what we have for limitations, which is size of buildings. Adding modular classrooms. I'm not a big fan, but sometimes they're a necessity, and to the point that it's a short term. Right now we're looking at the high school for renovation. We had a meeting last night talking about what we're doing with the expansion and renovation, because we're trying to plan ahead, and again, long term, with watching what we thought was a bubble group turn into a trend, and those kids are going to be coming up through and going to be reaching high school in the next 5 to 6 years. So we need to do something to address that. And also, based on the projections, we need to figure out what we're doing at the elementary level. Whether it's going to be in addition to an existing elementary school or figuring out something to do. And at our last school committee workshop, we found out that pretty soon we're going to outgrow the middle school. So not only are we looking right now at growing at the high school and trying to figure that out, but we're going to have some very tough conversations coming up as to how we deal with the incoming student population, to deal not only with the elementary, but as they go to middle school. Because we're going to be seeing an influx of students, and that facility is going to be at capacity pretty soon as well. So we really need to look long-term, and the plan of the school committee is to start with that long-term vision. I apologize if I'm talking as if I'm on it, but I've been on this for so long and talking about it, it's just natural. That was the plan that we set up, is to start long-term and back into, okay, this is where we think we want to go as a district. And then let's back into what are the short-term pieces to get us to that long-term goal. So it's a very difficult conversation. It's been one that it's been a heated one at times, going back and forth, but the good thing is everybody's coming from the right way and the right place. They're trying to do what's best for what they think is different. And that's one of the things that's great about having a group of 7. You have 7 different perspectives and ideas and thoughts, and we don't always agree, but everybody's trying for the best thing, and as long as everybody's coming from the right place, it's been wonderful to have those discussions.
Yeah, very good group, and I would say too that from the perspective of somebody that gets to listen to the school committee conversations, I do enjoy the fact that there are 7 different people, 7 different perspectives, 7 different ideas, and folks are not afraid to share those thoughts and those ideas, and to basically ultimately kind of come together to a decision that works in the best interest of students across the board. So the fact that we have a really well-functioning school committee is helpful, because the conversations that we're having are difficult and complex, and I don't see those getting any easier over the course of the next few years. So yes,
Nope.
Ann, you're jumping into the deep
Right.
end of the pool.
But we'll help you.
So the next topic I wanted to just bring up is a topic that I think is near to, and dear to many parents' hearts, and having two parents here as well, I'm sure you can articulate some thoughts about this, is the topic of school safety. And again, talk about a complex conversation and some of the things that we're having to deal with as school systems nowadays that we didn't have to deal with, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, and just how difficult some of these conversations are around school safety. We have, in Gorham, we're blessed with some resources that other communities in the state may not have. We do have on-site school resource officers and a tremendous relationship with our Gorham Police Department and with the Gorham Fire Department and with other emergency responses through the town of Gorham. So we have some really great relationships there. We have a full-time school resource officer that's located at the high school, and we have another full-time school resource officer that's shared amongst our K-8 buildings. And they really do a lot of proactive relationship building and really focus on those kinds of things. We had a couple years ago, we did a nice referendum to upgrade not only some of our roof structures that were in desperate need, but we also did some security upgrades. We did a lot of cameras, installation of cameras, video cameras, and door locks, and a lot of different things across all of our schools. Our schools and our principals pay close attention to drills, making sure our what we call our gold plans, which is our school-based emergency plans, are in order, up to date every year, and those kinds of things. And we do a lot of training with the staff as well to make sure that they're as prepared as possible. But we're even having to consider some changes in those things, and we're probably getting up on a time in which we really need to take another thorough look at our emergency planning process and sort of say, okay, this is what we've been doing for the past 8 years. Let's wipe that off the board and let's start a little bit from scratch. Here's how do we want to go forward with the complexities of the conversations around safety. So I guess my question for both of you, and I'll start this one off with Ann as well. As a school committee member, what would you advocate for that would improve school safety across the district's 5 schools? And it could be anything from a focus on a curriculum to building facilities kinds of related things. So what are some thoughts that you might have on improving school safety?
Okay, well, again, that's another difficult question, and I regret that we're in the time we're in that we even have to have this conversation. But absolutely, I mean, again, I'll emphasize I have 2 kids in the schools. You want to make sure that everybody's safe. I think first and foremost, keeping and maintaining that relationship between the police department and the fire department and local emergency responders, I think is huge. And bringing them into the conversation at all levels before any decisions are made to make sure that, one, the facilities are safe, that nobody that shouldn't be is getting in and out of our schools at any given time. Make sure that people are identified properly. Again, those cameras that you mentioned. The drills, extremely significant. Whether or not, we're dealing with an emergency situation, a lockdown drill or a fire drill. Making sure that those procedures are up to date and according to what local law enforcement and fire departments have recommended. Other than that, it does sound like you guys are, Gorham has been doing a good job. Whether or not we could use an additional SRO, if one's available, again, I know those resources aren't free. I'm not really sure where to go from there, but I'm open to continuing the discussion if I get elected and making sure that we make the appropriate improvements in that area.
Good. Thank you. Darryl, thoughts?
Yeah, it is a difficult conversation to have. I've sat through many of those meetings. We've had a lot of those conversations. And to your point, the number one thing I think we can do is continue with the relationships that we have with the first responders. The chief comes into the school, has been to meetings, the officers come in and they talk to us, they talk to our students. Building that relationship is extremely important because if our students see something that's out of the ordinary, knowing that they have a police officer that they can go to and just say, you know what, something looked funny, or I saw this on Facebook, it happens, you see it, something goes out on Facebook, the first thing that happens is the school leadership, they engage the police department, and immediately things start to move. So having that relationship that we have as a district with the police department and first responders is by far one of the top priorities to maintain. We can always do something with our facilities. We've made a lot of changes with the help of the town council. I will give kudos to them for helping us out because they helped us with a good bit of money of getting some of that security stuff done when we needed to quite a few years ago. But there's always upgrades. I was watching the news or something this weekend and saw that what other districts are doing with facial recognition and things like that they're having that, it's just piloting out in a few schools and it's starting, but technology and safety and security is always going to be changing and upgrading. We just need to make sure that we're kind of following what those are and doing the best we can to incorporate whatever security measures we can. The big thing we're talking about at the high school on the building committee is changing the entrance so that it's a much more secure building than what we have now. So have the main entrance where the administrative offices are. That's a huge security issue. It's been one we've talked about for many, many years. But things like that, if we're looking to do something with a building, we need to be looking at how are we going to increase and improve the security that we have for our students. So that needs to continue to be the case as well. And it's the conversation and the partnership that we have with the town council as well, because a lot of that stuff is above and beyond what we can do within the constraints of our budget. But in the past, they've shown that they've the willingness to kind of step in and provide us the additional support that we needed at the time.
Yeah, good. Yeah, very good. I would say that, when it comes to the issues of safety, I think it's a community-wide issue. And I think Gorham has definitely demonstrated in the past, and I'm sure they'll continue to demonstrate in the future that the community as a whole is very interested in doing what they can to support the safety and security of the students. So you mentioned it a little bit, so this is sort of a natural transition to the next topic, which is the high school building project. So it was your fault, Darryl, for mentioning it. So I'm going to start with you on this particular question, and then Ann can follow up. So it's been out there in the public conversation. We've had some public conversations. We've had some workshop meetings with the town council. I think everybody is aware in the community of Gorham that we are seeking to do a capital renovation in addition to the high school. There's lots of reasons for that. The biggest one is the building was built for 750 students. We have about 868 in the building now, and that's due to grow over the course of the next 9 years to just under 1,000 students if projections hold even close to where they're supposed to be. Not only is the building in need of some TLC, but the athletic fields are also in need, and again, in terms of the growing populations and the types of things that we can do with those athletic fields, we need to be doing some upgrades there. And so I guess my question is, because this is a locally, it's going to have to be a locally funded project, which makes it a much larger impact to the community in the form of costs that are associated with that. And I guess my question is, well, do you support the need for the capital renovation in addition to GHS? And then could you explain your thought process on why you support that or you don't support that conversation?
Well, that was probably the easiest question I'll get. So I do support doing something at the high school, and the reason I support it is all the work that we've been doing on the building committee talking about it, and talking to the administration, talking to the teachers, students, the survey that we sent out to the public that we used, Thought Exchange, I think is the name of it that we used, and we got so many responses from the public regarding the high school and what the public thinks about it in specific areas. It was interesting to me to see that air conditioning was the number one for students. By far, that was, I think, the number one piece that they wanted us to look at. That's part of the overall discussion. I think it's nice to have the building committee that we have in conjunction with the athletic capital campaign committee working to not only deal with the building itself and the facility, but also the fields, and working at both of them at the same time to see what we can do, because we do need to do something with the fields. We have a shortage of fields. Our competition field is used more than it should be. For anybody that's been to some of our athletic events on the main competition field inside the track, as the season wears on, you can see the wear and tear. So it's quite obvious as you follow the sports and as that goes through. But we need to look at it as a whole. It is locally funded, so there are going to be things that we would really love to do and we think we might have the need to do now that we may not be able to do. The fact that we have the group around the table that is sitting there and talking about it, we're really looking at what are the major concerns we have for the facility, which is we have a growing population, we need more classrooms, we need more science spaces, we need things that are going to affect our students directly. And that's where our main focus is. Again, with our meeting we had last night, that's what we were talking about, moving things to make it easier so that we can have much more of a student-friendly atmosphere with how it works, but also trying to incorporate some community spaces as well, because this is going to be a community project. We want some spaces that the community can actually use in the facility. We don't know exactly what they are. Again, we're still in the drawing, on the drawing table with it, with the architects, but there's a lot of conversation regarding what we are going to do and what the plans are for the high school. We need to do something. The population isn't going away. I'm fully supportive of the idea of moving forward with a renovation and expansion. I can't say exactly what the cost will be or what the footprint will look like because we're not even there yet. We have so many more meetings to go through before we get to those numbers. Hopefully numbers will be coming in the next few months. Never know. We have plenty of time. I say that hoping with a referendum expected based on the town council's direction to the school committee of a November 2019 referendum. So we have time to really look through and discuss that. But I'm very supportive of going through the process that we're going to because there is the definite need there.
Good, thank you. Ann, any thoughts to add in terms of the high school building project? I know your students are not quite at the high school
Right.
yet, but they will be.
Yeah.
So any thoughts?
After that, I don't really know what I could possibly add, especially because I haven't been part of the discussion throughout this process or been involved in the committee. However, I do support expanding the high school. Absolutely, I think it's needed, and I'm looking forward to learning more and getting involved in the specifics.
Yeah, good, thank you. All right, next topic I have is, it's sort of related to growth, but it's also one that's related to an understanding of best practices in education and sort of, what works well and what doesn't. The topic is around class sizes, which is one that comes up when we're dealing with the issues of growth that we have been dealing over the course of time. There's been a lot of conversations around what's the appropriate class size for students at the elementary level, for students at the middle school level, and for students at the high school level. And there's been a good amount of talk around that. And we have what we call in Gorham our guidelines. We have class size guidelines that were created for the K through 5 level. We do not have guidelines for the 6 through 12 level, although we tend to use the state of Maine's guidelines on that. But for our elementary guidelines, right now, we have our optimal levels, and this is a fun one, and this is sort of educational for you, Ann, as well. But our optimal levels are for kindergarten class sizes to be around 18 students or less, for our first and second grade class sizes to be around 20 students or less, and for our grades 3 through 5 class sizes to be around 23 students or less. Now, those are optimal. That means that there's going to be class sizes that are above, some that might be below. The fun part, as Darryl can probably articulate, is trying to get them to be consistent. But I guess, and at the middle school level right now, we're running around 24 students to a teacher. And at the high school level, it's around 22, 21, right in that range per teacher. But there's also some fun things at the high school to talk about in that area because it's hard to average that out. I guess my question to you is around your beliefs about class sizes. Are class sizes important in schools, and is it important to have those kind of conversations about class sizes? And what do you think about those guidelines? Are they too high, too low, right, perfect? And anything else that you want to share around your thoughts about class sizes and the importance of student-to-teacher ratios? So I'm going to start with Darryl on this one, and then go to Ann.
Boy, we've been talking about class sizes for a long time. My thought on the class sizes and the guideline ranges, and anybody that sat through a workshop when we're talking about this or had a conversation with me over the last 2+ years kind of knows how I stand on that. First, it's all depends on what your definition of optimal is. And I learned that through the time on the reconfiguration committee, as well as after that with discussions on the school committee. For me, optimal, and these are guidelines that were set before I was on the school committee, so I didn't have any part in making these guidelines. But we have an optimal level, we have a mid-level, and then we have a max class size. Those are all specifically stated in the guidelines. They're not rules, they're not policies, they're guidelines. For me, how I interpret optimal is that's where, when these were established, that's where we thought was the most effective and efficient way or efficient number to have for students in the classroom. We try not to go over that. When we get to the mid-level, that's when we start looking to add additional support. So we're looking at adding ed techs into the classroom and things like that. And then if we were to get to the max level, that's when we look at splitting up classrooms, adding another teacher, that sort of thing. Class sizes, the smaller the class sizes, the better. The trouble we've had in Gorham over the last few years is consistency and equity across our, we'll talk about the elementaries, K-5, is having equity around all three of our K-5 schools. We have some class sizes that are at optimal or maybe one or two more for one grade level, and in a different school, they're well under the optimal level. So I know that when you add a student, because I actually listen to the district leadership team, I listen to the teachers that talk to me all the time about things like this, and many discussions I've had over the few years we've been talking about this. Adding one student changes the whole dynamic of a classroom. So looking at a way that we can try to optimize those classrooms across all of our schools so that all of our kids are getting equitable. They're not ever going to get the exact same because teachers are so different. Some teachers could thrive on larger class sizes, some may struggle, and then depends on what the student makeup is. So what type of students you have in the class. I think looking at trying to get things to that optimal level for class sizes based on the beginning of that guidelines, that's the place to start. And then we're looking at all kinds of competing priorities as to where this funding is. It's not unlimited, so we only have a certain amount of funding where we should be putting our resources. That's where that difficult conversation comes in. Well, do we have 21 students in first grade and maybe not have to use additional resources because we have another need in something else or somewhere else within our budget? So those are the conversations we have. I do like the idea of trying to keep our class sizes as small as possible. You read the research, it's all over the place. So I couldn't say, you know what, 18 is great in kindergarten. 16 would probably be better. 14 even better. 10 even better than that. I mean, you could just decrease the class sizes. It's more time that the students would have with the teachers. So I would think that you would get more of or a better education and from that interaction with the teachers. But that's the balancing act that we have to do is where do we go and what number will provide a really great experience for all of our students. And you know what, if we have to kind of shift things around, we need to be open to having those conversations. And that's the great thing is we've been having conversations and we've come up with a ton of different ideas of what to do. And we're going to be talking more about how do we want to use the scarce resources we have, which is the money from the taxpayers. How are we going to use that money most effectively, K-12, for all of our students and really take that into consideration. It's not just a K-5 issue, it's a district issue. So as long as we keep that in mind as we talk about it, I think that will help us in the long run.
Ann, do you have anything to add?
Well, I do agree that it's a district issue, and the research that I've read, I agree with Darryl's all over the place, but at least what I've read does seem to lean towards the biggest impact is between student-to-teacher ratio is in an elementary level, not just for education, but also for social skills, getting used to being in school, learning how to be part of this community. And so in an ideal world, I'd love those numbers to be lower. However, I recognize the realities of we have limited funding. And I believe that we've even lost funding, correct me if I'm wrong, given the fact that certain state subsidies were lost because of the growth that we're facing here. So I'll just go and kind of piggyback on your statement there that it is a balancing act. And another difficult situation to get into.
These complexities around growth are multiple, that's for sure, and they ripple across everything, whether it's class sizes in a school, or a number of students on a bus with transportation, and a number of students in the cafeterias going through our school nutrition program. It's, when you add students, it ripples across the entire system.
Well, and that's another great reason why I love being on the school committee, because you get to talk about, and you really have an impact on those conversations and what the experience is that the students have through their career in the Gorham School District. So it's fun to have those and to be a part of that, really trying to have even 7 people with 7 different ideas and perspectives and everything like that, but everybody at the end really just pulling to see what's best for all of our students that we have in the district. And it's one of the things I enjoy most about being on the school committee.
Good. All right, so my next topic is one I know that we've talked about as a school committee, and you might have heard about in recent conversations, and it's one that's a little bit of a political hot button in other schools across the area, and not one that we've researched and we've talked about, but not one that we've tackled just yet, but it might be on the horizon in some future conversation. So I wanted to get your thoughts on it, and the topic is around school start times. And so we've had, in Gorham, what we've done is we've really, so far, we've done a lot of research around best practices. We've had a study group and a committee that was formed last year, or maybe the spring before a little bit, to think about, okay, so if we were to pursue this conversation in Gorham, what would that look like? What are the implications? We've researched, the impacts to parents. We've talked about, what are the impacts to the bus routes and athletics and all the different ripples that changing start times in a school day would have upon the community. And right now, the high school starts at about 7:50, 7:55. Middle school's right in the same area or ballpark. Our elementaries come in later, so our elementary students start about 9 o'clock because we have that 2-tiered system. And the study group that met really, if they recommended that if we look forward to addressing start times and the issues around sleep and adolescence and the whole thing around, when are students at that age level, middle school and high school, really ready to learn optimally, their recommendation was to actually try to flip-flop the two systems. Whether or not that actually comes to fruition, there's a whole other conversation, but I guess what I'm asking, and I'll start with you, Ann, on this one, what are your beliefs about start times and school start times? Is this something that a school should really be looking at, or maybe not? What are your thoughts?
Well, it doesn't hurt to reevaluate anything and make sure that the start times are appropriate for the age group. However, of course, I have seen what's happened in other districts, and I don't know how it would be handled here. And I think before really coming out with an opinion on that matter, I'd have to see what's happened throughout these study groups with the community, how it would impact the community, parents, like you mentioned, athletics, before, again, making an opinion on that.
Good. Darryl, any thoughts?
I would agree. We've had a presentation from the committee that did provided the recommendation, but we really haven't started to dive into it. I do have to say I have a ton of questions to ask, knowing that we had issues with the growing population in elementary schools, possible reconfiguration. The school committee decided that let's tackle the population piece first, because that was the biggest priority that we needed to tackle at the time, so we've tabled it for, I think we're starting in November, to start talking about this, or maybe early next year to have that conversation. So I wouldn't be able to provide what my opinion is because I have a lot of unanswered questions. And the one thing that I think we do very well in Gorham as a district is we really try to think about, we're not always successful, but we try to think about what the repercussions will be. Sometimes you see them coming and you can avoid them. We can see what happened in other districts around the state that have done this, so we can kind of try to navigate around those landmines. But there are others that no matter what decision is made, there are going to be repercussions that we didn't see coming. So how do we build in any sort of flexibility or anything like that to be able to fully implement it the way that we wanted it to get the most benefit out of the students? And if we're not going to get benefits for the students, then why would we do it? So I will not provide an opinion at this time because I really honestly don't know.
Very good. Yeah, I think that, and that's another great example, Darryl, of the way that our school committee works is really asking those important questions about why. Why would we do something? What are we hoping to gain as an outcome of any potential change, and really getting a solid understanding of what that outcome is. And then if we need to make adjustments as we implement things, and we do that, but really being clear about what do we want as that outcome, what do we want to address as an issue when we make those decisions. So that's really a good example of that, Darryl. So the next topic I have, and I think we're running out of topics here pretty quickly, so I think it might be close to the last one. I might have one more after this, is the topic of proficiency-based learning. And again, I'm trying to get some topics out here that parents might be interested in understanding what your thoughts are about these things, because these have been sort of hot topics from conversations at the school level amongst parents and amongst students and amongst staff. So the topic of proficiency-based learning. So a little background. Gorham's been working on this for a lot of years, well before there was any state statute that said we needed to be working on this. There was a state law that was passed in about 2012 or so that dictated or demanded a proficiency-based diploma. Recently, the state legislature has stepped back on that particular legislation and has now offered local school systems to make a choice between whether or not they want to go with a traditional diploma approach or a proficiency-based learning diploma approach. We've really focused on making incremental, well-thought-out, methodical types of changes to our system as we move forward, really having a clear understanding of why we're trying to do things. We've really focused a lot on our instructional practices in this work and really trying to be thoughtful and mindful about, how are we doing things in the classroom that's benefiting students. And there's been a lot of public communication around the topic of proficiency-based learning. And we've tried to be mindful about some of the landmines that are out there in Gorham that we don't, that are not necessarily things that we need to address because they're not part of the beliefs about why we're doing proficiency-based learning. So we still do things, we've made decisions around still doing things like calculating a GPA, still having a traditional transcript for our high school, although adding some pieces to it, and utilizing what we're calling our blended scale, so that there's still things that are reported on the 100-point scale, so we can still calculate a GPA. I guess my question around this is, wondering about what is your understanding of proficiency-based learning? Do you have any kind of beliefs around if it's good or bad and why? And what would you do as a school committee member? What would you continue to do in Darryl's case to continue to learn and ask questions about this system to ensure that it's really having the maximum positive impact on our students? So I'm going to start with Darryl on that and then let Ann go with that.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Sue.
So the one thing that I'll say about proficiency-based learning is, and the proficiency-based diploma, is that things have changed dramatically back and forth through the years. I think the original idea of what the legislature wanted to do was great and kind of moving us towards that. The way in which they gave us direction was a little more difficult to follow. So I think the underneath of trying to make sure that all of our students are proficient in different skills and as they go through, I think that that's a great idea. It's all about how you implement it. I like the fact that we've been implementing it in the small steps and we've been kind of slowly moving. Even with that slow movement, there's been a lot of challenges. What does a 3.2 mean for a high school student, or what will it mean? And again, to your point of the GPA, and what's this going to do to my student trying to go to college? How are the admissions counselors going to look at this? Those are the questions that we ask and we have been asking. I think it's a good idea. I really like the idea of allowing individual districts to implement as they see fit, and whether it's totally proficiency-based or if it's something else or a blend. That's part of the conversation we've been having. And one of the questions that came up to the superintendent is, do we still need to go that route? Is there something else that we could be doing that would have a little bit of the proficiency-based, which would allow us to know that when we have a student walk across that stage at Merrill Auditorium, that they're proficient in things that are going to make them successful, whether they go in the military, they go to school, they go to work, they go to a trade, whatever they do, they're going to be successful because they're proficient in the basics that they need to be successful in life. So I really like the way that we're doing that and still looking at the best way to implement that So I look forward to continuing that conversation. And as Heather knows, I am not afraid of asking questions, tough questions, and I will continue to do so. And it's a lot of the times those tough questions come up just for clarification or just to think of something different. And again, that's another thing that having 7 people on a school committee is people are going to come up with questions that may be difficult to answer based on where we're going, but it allows us to say, well, we thought about this option as well. Did you think about anything else? Yes, we actually talked about it. Well, we didn't go that way because there was more benefit to do this than to do that. So I look forward to the continuing conversation. Like I said, the underlying idea of proficiency-based I thought is amazing. It's the implementation of it is where the the rubber meets the road.
Good. And anything to add from your perspective?
Well, I've had a similar viewpoint, meaning I like certain aspects of it, but I've questioned the implementation. Again, back to that, how does it impact applying for colleges, competition with other districts that may, or other students that have different ways of who are not on the proficiency-based learning plan. But again, as you can see, I have a lot to educate myself on regarding that, and I will have a lot of questions moving forward before I can really form an opinion.
Yeah, that's great. And again, another great example of the school committee and their role and responsibilities is asking those difficult questions and ensuring that those things are in place to really help our students move forward, and that what we're doing for these changes in our curriculum and in our instructional approaches really are those things that have the most positive impact on our students. And so those conversations have happened. They'll continue to occur, I have no doubt, and I look forward, Ann, to your participation in those conversations as well. I think at this point then, I think we're probably about ready to wrap up. I do have one closing question though, and I thought this was a great one to end with. And again, it's great experience for somebody that has had a lot of experience in the school committee, but the question can be answered equally as well by somebody that has had no experience on the school committee. So hopefully we'll get some good engaging questions or thoughts here. My question is this, and I asked this as part of my, when I first came to Gorham, as part of my re-entry plan or entry plan into the community of Gorham, and how do I get to know the community of Gorham? And one of the things I always like to ask is, if you had unlimited resources, and if you had sort of that magic wand, and you were trying to do one thing, just one thing that would really positively impact the school system in Gorham, and you had that unlimited resources, price tags didn't matter, but it's just one thing that you can do, what would that be for you? Where would you focus your attention if you had that one thing that you could do to really positively impact the schools? Give you a second. And then, any volunteers to start first, or I'm going to just call on somebody if not?
I'll let you start on this one. I've been talking a lot.
And it could be anything.
It's a difficult question, but looking at the needs of the community at this time, it may be not the most exciting answer, but I'd say I'd expand the schools. Every single school, maybe add another elementary school, but I know that's one thing would be on expansion, because I do believe that the growth and how we're going to manage that growth is something that really needs to happen. Discussion needs to happen, of course, and it has been happening, but the plan needs to be in place.
Yeah,
So.
and certainly that's something that's going to dictate, where we go as a school system for a lot of years moving forward. So that's a great area to focus on. Thank you. That was a great answer, Ann. That's very good. Darryl, what do you think?
It was a really good answer, because that's what I was thinking. I was thinking we'd level all the schools, put a big campus together so that we have K-12 in a campus facility, that we have plenty of room for expansion. So just upgrading all of our facilities so that they're ready for 21st and hopefully as we continue on through the century, 22nd century learning, because we talk about how kids are going to learn 10, 20, 50 years from now.
That's very different.
But just setting up facilities so that we can handle whatever's thrown at us with the growth of population, build that more community feel around schools. So, they start in kindergarten on that end and they end up in graduating on the other end, and just providing the facilities that would benefit our students, all of our students throughout the whole district, and being able to do that. But when you first asked that question, I had all the, okay, if we did that, then the budget numbers just start flowing through my head of where the other pieces were, so.
Yeah, so.
But exactly, that was a great answer, because that's exactly what I was thinking, is the facilities piece.
Well, that seems to be a very important topic then, doesn't it? That's good. Well, I thank you for your time this evening. I think you guys have done a great job of meandering through several different topics and maybe not necessarily even related topics as we've gone through. So I appreciate your ability to maneuver around those topics and participate in answering some questions. I think that those that are watching this in the community will be more informed about you as individuals as you prepare to either start another term as a school committee member or start your first term as a school committee member. So really appreciate your time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.